Montessori in education. You know, there's a missing link to Montessori, and it's something I'm going to discuss today with my guest, who I'll introduce in just a moment. Montessori's been around for over 150 years, so it certainly has a huge role to play in education. Hello, my name is Christine Cook. I'm a Montessori mum, a current Montessori teacher, and a former holistic kinesiology practitioner. Please like and subscribe to my channel below, and please take some time to hit the link to my email list so you can stay up to date in case this video gets taken down. You'll be able to keep in contact with me. So today I'm going to introduce a special guest who is going to help open up a conversation today about Montessori and spirituality. So today I'm going to introduce you to the delightful Michaela Rauch.
Hello everyone, my name is Michaela Rauch. I am currently living in Beechworth, northeast Victoria, a beautiful little town, tourist town now. I have 6 children and 8.5 grandchildren. I have, my background is nursing. I first left school, I did my nursing, and then I had children quite young. And then I found Montessori I found Montessori when I was pregnant with my first child, who's nearly 40. And someone gave me a book called The Secret of Childhood by Dr. Montessori. And I thought, never heard of it. Anyway, never heard of it. I read it and just went, wow, there are values I didn't even know I had that I was aligning with reading her book. And that was my beginning of my Montessori journey. My first 2 children went to a Montessori preschool in Western Australia. And then over in the United States, we lived there for a little while. I came back to Australia, and then in 1995 I was pregnant with my 5th child, and I had 2 children do Montessori. My first 2, my second 2, there was no Montessori here in Beechworth, and then I was pregnant with my 5th child, and I thought, right, I need a Montessori preschool. I could just see the differences, and I know that each of my children are different. But I just thought, no, I would like to have a Montessori preschool. So a friend of mine was a bank manager. He was also a clown on the weekends, and he had a Sparky bus. So he took a handful of our parents who were interested and their children down to Melbourne Montessori. It was Caulfield Montessori back then. That was back in 1996. And we did some observations there, and the parents from town who went down there went, wow, we want this. So basically, after putting an ad in the paper for those who might be interested, 6 months later, we started Beechworth Montessori Children's Group. That's its incorporation name. And we were fortunate enough to get a space up at the old Mayday Hills site. And that was in 1997. And today the school has its own buildings and sites for the school. They no longer rent, which is great. We have over 100 children from the ages of 12 months old to grade 6, 12 years old roughly. We have 2 classes of each cycle, what we call cycles. So I guess my life and my passion has been Montessori. I did my Montessori training, and 2 of my 4 children went through Montessori. Actually, the 5th one didn't. We only had preschool for 10 years, and then we go to primary school start 10 years later. So my youngest went through most of his primary school and preschool age. We also have in town, the local high school has started the MAP program, the Montessori Adolescent program, and that was probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago, which is a boon for our town. And it's on site at the local high school, Beechworth High School. So my interest and passion has been Montessori, and really honing in from the 3 to 6 group to 0 to 3. I find that a very interesting age group, and they're just lovely. They are beautiful. So that's sort of been my background. I was casual nursing alongside all those years up until last year. And I don't do that anymore. What else can I say? I'm still passionate about Montessori, but I am passionate too about the spiritual aspect of Montessori. I'm not talking church as such. I'm talking the spirituality of the child, that inner being. Who are they? And what do they need? What are their needs? How can we serve the child? And I'm not saying like a slave, but to serve and assist the development of the inner growth and psyche of that child in alignment with their own inner teacher and inner self. So there you go.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Michaela. Let's get started with our conversation. Well, we know that Maria Montessori was a phenomenal, insightful woman who brought forth an educational system that was just so different to what we see today in the mainstream realm. And we know that she had many, many insights as to how children develop. And let's just talk about Montessori. It has a spiritual backdrop, and it really is prominent in her writing. She talks about the spiritual embryo. She talks about the soul throughout all her contexts and books. She talks about the spiritual preparation of the teacher and lots of spiritual terminology throughout her writing. But it seems today that if you look around in the Montessori landscape, the spiritual side of things seems to have either been watered down, or it just doesn't even appear in a lot of schools and a lot of different childcare centres. And it's something that I'm a little bit concerned about, because if we're going to use Montessori, we need to use the whole platform of Montessori and not just nitpick and take out all the different ones or aspects of Montessori that suit us. I think we need to bring back spirituality into the whole of Montessori, and because it is a holistic model, which we know that children need to have spiritual nourishment. So what are your thoughts about that, Michaela?
Look, I would agree, Christine. I've been in over 30 different Montessori environments, 3 to 6 year old environments, as well as a 0 to 3 environment. I have seen a great presentation of the materials in the sense and the environment, that I think there is that key element missing of that heart connection with the children. And coming with that, Montessori is a great academic curriculum in many ways. It is fabulous. But at the same time, it needs the soul of the child to be recognised. It's not just a lot of hurdles and hoops that we go through, or the children go through, and you can tick the box and go, yes, she's done the red tower, the red rods, she's done the pink tower, and so forth. It is more holistic than that. And I agree with you. I think a lot of that is not being perhaps taught or discussed with the educators. I think that's some of the training that is out there is devoid of that, or it's not pursued to the greater depths that it could be and discussed with reflections amongst staff. It also is something that comes within the educator. We have to be really humble before the children that we have in our care. And sometimes we don't see that. I think there's quite an element of pride. And Dr. Montessori talked about the 7 deadly sins in one of her books. I cannot remember which one it was. And she said, this is imperative for the educator or the teacher to master these within herself if she is able to reach and understand the soul of the child. So I think there are lots of, and I'm not saying they're not good Montessori schools, they are good Montessori environments, but some of them are very devoid. And you can see that in the children's faces and their body language and the way they interact in the environment.
You certainly can. And if we do step back and just observe the children, they do show us exactly what's happening in their relationship with their inner teacher and the inner world that they're experiencing. So
and that's trust, isn't it? That's trust for the child and belief in the child. I mean, my main focus of teaching over the years has been 3 to 6, but probably the last 10 years, maybe a little bit more, I have focused on the 0 to 3 or 4-year-old age group, just the environments I've been working in. And my background is nursing. I'm a mother of 6. Thank goodness I didn't have them all at once. So hats off to those parents who have multiple births in the same time. But my teaching experience with Montessori or learning experience, really, that's what it is, isn't it? Learning experience. You get the basics like for any profession that you go into, and then it's your experience that starts to really count, or in this case, our pedagogy. So my background is dealing with people from really young ages to elderly ages, and I've worked side by side with my nursing and Montessori over the years. And I see that too in the health field. There is the mechanical steps that you go through, but it's actually that inner listening to the patient, or in this case, with a Montessori environment, with the child, with the soul of the child. Well, it's the soul of the patient as well, but having that ability to, and that love, that desire to really want to hear where is this soul at? Whether the soul be, the child be 2 years or the person be 50 or 70, it's really that inner longing to want to be able to assist, not do it for people, but love them enough to sit, observe, listen clearly.
Yes. And we know that Dr. Montessori used the terminology inner teacher to reference the inner voice that the children are actually listening to as they go about their day-to-day work and activities in the classroom. And we know that this inner teacher has a prominent place between the age of 0 and 6. Can you speak to that?
I can. I guess my basic belief, or one of my basic beliefs, is that I believe in reincarnation. So I've come to the environment working with children, that these are not new souls. They have been here before, and you hear lots of people who probably don't believe in reincarnation go, oh, this soul's, this child's been here before, look at the way they do this and this. And for me, as part of my pedagogy, I come to respect that, okay, you might have an infant body, the child might be 10 months old or 6 months old or 18 months old, but there is a soul there that's had many, many experiences over past embodiments that deserves respect. There is also that soul that has the inner teacher. We all have that inner guidance and that inner conscience and voice that is most important. And we need to listen to that. And I do believe when I see, the children in the first 6 years of life, that they are very much in tune with that. And I think over a period of time, our external environments, whether they're, in school or preschool or at home or wherever it is, the Western world, versus the Eastern culture, so different and so many different values, that influences the child's relationship with their inner teacher. It can actually detract from that child's relationship with their inner teacher. So in a Montessori environment, we need to provide that experience for the child where they're able to continue to listen and to grow that relationship with their inner teacher, not to water it down, not to, cut away from that. So part of the job as my job as an educator and director in a room is to make sure that that is nurtured. It's recognized, and B, that we nurture that within each child who is in that environment. And the children see that. You model your behaviors, your reactions as an educator, as a parent. No matter where you are, you have to walk the talk. And so the children are so in that sensitive period, with observations and absorption in the unconscious absorbent mind the first 3 years, and then the conscious absorbent mind in the second 3 years, to when they're 3 to 6, that they just absorb everything. They're like little sponges. Well, they're not, but they are in that sense. They don't discriminate. They take on board what they see, feel, hear, and intuitively know. And so it's so important to be that example for children in the environment. And then they start to model that behavior with each other. Well, currently I have, I'm only working a couple of days a week now. And one of the days I have these 8 children that come into the environment. There are 2 of us and 2 educators in the room. And my youngest child, I think, is 18 months. And the oldest child is nearly 3. And they are just amazing to see their capabilities and what they do and how they treat each other. Like, there are no tantrums. There's such a peace and a calm air within their own being. They're full of dignity with themselves. And we have to treat them with dignity because they have that inner majesty that they, or majestic sense of who they are. Unknowingly, you know what I mean? When you see a little child, they are who they are. And they're not ashamed of who they are. They are just who they are. And we have to nurture that and respect it.
We certainly do. And for those people that are not sure about Montessori or are still exploring and researching Montessori, I think the biggest difference that, or the contrasting difference between Montessori and mainstream conventional schooling is that Montessori is very much enriching and drawing out the inner world from the child. And in fact, the word education comes from educare, which is to draw out. And so our mainstream system is all about the outer world and drawing children away from their spirit, whereas Montessori draws children to their spirit. And that spirit is very much anchored in between the ages of, well, conception and 6. And we know that children have, this remarkable sensitivities. And through these sensitivities, Dr. Montessori set up an environment so that not only does the inner teacher, and that, like, it's like the sat nav, I suppose, that you could call it, that it guides the children in their environment. And the materials speak to the child. And so there's a real heart inner communication happening, that the children follow this voice within their inner teacher, which really is, we know, is the voice of God. So they have this really delicate communication that is a sensitivity that they have that just gets strengthened over time when they're working in this prepared environment in a Montessori format. So it's really important that we understand, and teachers and parents understand, that there's an amazing alchemical marriage between the child when they're working, following their inner teacher, listening to the voice of God and drawing forth, all the talents that they can bring forth while they are working. And it is an alchemical experience in a Montessori room. And I have seen, and I'm sure you've seen over many years, the difference children undergo in their transformation from, a little wee crawling infant to a walking, talking toddler, just in that little milestone alone, is quite remarkable when you've got the formula set right with the teacher in her heart space or his heart space, having reverence for the soul of that child, and just having that beautiful alchemical marriage between the child and the materials and the teacher. Does that make sense?
Look, it does, absolutely.
Yeah.
There is that inner alchemy happening within the child, because part of our job as a Montessori guide or an educator is to observe. And I've found over the years, a lot of Montessori teachers are so busy they don't observe. And it's really, I think you have to rein yourself in, and even as a parent, to watch what the child is doing and to try and work out what are they experiencing, particularly if they might be busy doing something, doing an activity, and then they see someone else doing something and then they stop. And when they focus, when they concentrate, it's like their whole being is zooming in on that particular, whether it's an insect or if it's watching what someone is doing. And they pour their whole self into that experience. Now, as an educator, I need to sit back and wait. If I'm giving a presentation to a child, I need to sit back and wait until that child has finished, because I'd be cutting across his moment of experience, his choice, his moment of immersing himself in something that interests him. So as an educator, I look and think, okay, so he's interested in what this other child is doing. Maybe the child is scrubbing the table or polishing the leaves on a plant. Whatever the activity is, you take note of that. So that's part of that active listening, active observation work that we need to do, to recognize, not to cut in and go, here, you need to be watching what I'm doing here. Come on, you need to turn around. That's just not on. You need to wait. So you need patience and respect and humility, in the sense where you're not the center of focus in the room of this child's life. You're there to facilitate and to help the child and the child's inner teacher do the work, and to be observant to what the child needs and what the inner teacher is guiding the child to go forth for. I mean, the spiritual qualities of the children that Montessori discovered, a lot of people at that time weren't aware that that they can be independent. Like I said, I'm seeing 12-month-old, 18-month-old being independent as far as their physical capacities will allow them to be. Children can be very cooperative. They are very thoughtful. They're very helpful. They love to help. Even when they're tiny, they want to feel part of that whole union with life, whether it's at home or whether it's in their educational environment. And they are joyful learners. They love to learn. And they can learn without getting tired. If they are intrinsically motivated, that pushes them, and they will go and go and go. And I think as adults, we've all experienced that joy when we immerse ourselves in something that we love. We don't want to be interrupted. We don't want to be sidetracked. We just want to follow that path of interest and passion that it stirs within us in our interest. And it's the same with the children. That's how they learn. And children are very, very, very peaceful. One of the things that I've heard over the years for people who come into our school up here in Beechworth is they do observations, and they come away and they go, it's busy. It's a busy room, but it's peaceful. And I've thought about it for years and years. There are many aspects that are quite obvious why it's peaceful. But the thing that really struck me was that it's purposeful work. That you might have a room with 26 children in it, and most of the children doing purposeful work, and they are interacting and intermingling with others. We have a multi-age group, 3 to 6 or 0 to 3, depending where you are and how your Montessori environment's structured. But the children have this grace and an air that you don't often see, particularly, and I'm not pulling down traditional preschools, but it's just a different energy that is experienced. There are no spot fires. There is respect, and they learn patience. They learn to wait, because it's part of the modeling that happens in the room. There is a lot of activities and materials that there's only one of. So the children wait, and they're shown how to wait, or go and choose something else while that person has that particular activity for as long as they'd like. So there's this genuine love of learning. There's this genuine sense of peace within the children that are there. And particularly if the educators are in that same space of being at peace with themselves and with the environment. And to do that, they need to be able to trust the children and trust their choices.
Well, there is a definite noticeable flame in the room of love when the children only know love, really. And so when that is built upon and the culture in the room is respectful, it just even more so draws out of the children this love vibration and this loving atmosphere. And it's just beautiful. It's beautiful to watch, because we know that when we're working in our love on the Hertz vibrational scale, love vibrates at a 500 Hertz. And we know that the heart resonating and the electromagnetic field of the heart radiates from, I think it's 8 to 16 feet. So it's just when they're working in their love, they're radiating the love, and it's just infectious because it goes throughout the room. And it really is a time where children's experiences are anchored. So it's amazing to see all this in action, and I think more people need to really hone in on what is actually happening here. Know that children learn optimally when the environment is peaceful and they're feeling relaxed. So the nerve pathways and the hormones that are released from the heart signaling to the brain that now is a great time, an optimal time for learning. And so then the amygdala and the hypothalamus are all sinking in. And so the learning that is happening, the physical learning and the knowledge that's being taken in is now being anchored into fundamental parts of the brain that are responsible for that love and that whole, harmonious, loving vibration that they're working in. So when we know that stress is online, the brain shuts down. We've got adrenaline and all sorts of stress hormones kicking in. And so learning isn't happening and it's not an optimal time. So the prepared environment, having that love vibration, which comes from, everything in its place and everything has a place and everything's in order. So it's a vibrational setting that sets up education for the heart.
It is. And look, that brings me to the point of mindfulness. Quite a few years ago, I did a presentation comparing mindfulness and how Montessori incorporates mindfulness within its environment. Mindfulness was in maybe 7 years ago, something like that. It became quite big and everyone started practicing it, which I think is wonderful. But, the mind actually is in the heart. I think that's part of what you're saying, the brain. There is a physical brain, but the heart is that inner mind, that conscious cosmic mind that we have access to. And with mindfulness, meditation, all those things, it teaches and shows us and gives us practice to be able to focus on one thing at a time. And that's one thing I love about the Montessori environment is that there is, as you say, there is that calm, peaceful environment where children are in that makes them feel safe, because children have safety needs. They need to be safe and comfortable where they're at to be able to be open to learn. They let their guards down and they are able to learn. So the Montessori materials provides them that focusing, because each material has a certain objective for the child to realize and to experience. And so the children are able to immerse themselves in that particular experience, that one pointed mindfulness, which can then lead them after one particular activity. It can lead them to choose something that's a bit more challenging and more difficult, and that they're open. They choose that challenge. We don't impose it on them. They choose it as they feel ready. And I have this story of this girl, like she's now 20. I remember when she was a 3-year-old, she came into our environment, into our school. And then she, when she was about 4, she came in one morning and she was choosing her activities, very independent young soul, very much supported by both her parents. So had a wonderful background. And she'd been doing these activities and she started doing some language materials. And she needed some, after she had this really specific focusing so much on this work, she needed a bit of downtime. So I watched her choose a map of South America, which is a puzzle map of the continent of South America, right? It has all its different countries. I can't remember how many countries they've got. And she traced all the countries, and then she got the palette paints out and she painted them in accordance with the colors on the map. It took her 20 minutes. She just set it up herself. She did the work, and I just thought, and the look on her face, because I watched her do this whole thing, she turned around, she stood up and she says, like this. It was like this inner need had been met, but the energy and the focus and the joy and the peace in her face was incredible. I was really privileged to watch that.
Well, it is mindfulness. Yes, mindfulness, definitely. And I talk about that quite often. And it's a level of concentration that actually It's more than concentration because it's a meditation in action. So the children are working with their heart, head, and hand all in alignment. And then again, this beautiful energy just takes over. And we know as Montessori teachers, we just do not interrupt that flow because there's something really special happening. And Dr. Montessori pointed this out in her writings, that it's actually devastating for the soul if a teacher or Montessori teacher was to go and interrupt that particular flow and that momentum and that contact that they're having with their inner teacher and their higher self.
Absolutely. It's and that's part of your job, as protecting each child's learning, in the sense of not to disturb, not to become an obstacle to their learning, by timetables. And yes, I know we have a beginning and an end to the day in that sense, even though 24 hours, it does flow. But the children be picked up at a certain time and they arrive at a certain time and so forth. You need part of that structure to uphold the day and uphold the routines. Routines are good. Children actually love routines. They feel safe. They know it's coming. And as they're able to and more comfortable and developed within their own physical and emotional and mental needs, that you can make those routines slightly more flexible or change them, as needed in your own family too. So to interrupt a child's work is just something you don't do. And we call it work because it's construction of self. What they're choosing to do helps them with those skills that they need, whether it's learning to cut a banana or whether it's pouring, paint, or pouring water, or mixing, or doing some kind of botany or biology that you can have, in the classroom. I've got some for my 2-year-olds in my classroom, in my environment, and they love it. They love exploring and having the experience to those things. Whereas, some parents come in and they go, oh, I don't know about having glass in the room. But as I said to parents, they've only got to drop it once and they learn. If you have plastic cups, the cups bounce. Children don't really learn anything that other than plastic bounces, so they're not that careful. But if the child has a glass jug and a glass cup and accidentally drops it, that's not a big deal. We show the child how to clean up, how to fix things, how to remedy the situation, which adds to their independence. So part of the Montessori environment helps that child to become more and more independent as they feel comfortable. And that's different for every single child in the room because they're all not at the same place. We're all on different levels of growth and awareness and consciousness.
We certainly are. And if we could just go back again to the inner teacher, and one would say that what the Montessori environment is actually setting children up to strengthen their ESP, their extrasensory perception with the inner teacher, listening to that voice within, listening to their intuition, listening to their guidance. And even more over than that, we have lots of sensory rich activities that help fine-tune children's sense of hearing, their sense of sight, and with the colour tablets and the different gradients of the colours that we have in the colour tablets and the smelling jars. So we're getting children to hone in on their extrasensory perceptions and really fine-tuning those skills, and so that children are better able to bring down their talents through those kinds of masteries.
They become more aware of detail.
Oh.
Because, for example, if you take the colour box number 3, which has 7 different shades, we'll take blue, for instance. So initially the children learn the difference between the 3 primary colours, red, yellow and blue. Then they learn the names, and green, orange, so forth. And then they go into a bit more in-depth detail, observation and awareness of colour. So we can have 7 different shades of blue. And one of the activities that they can do, there are many activities they can do with that, but one of them is to line them from darkest to the light and light to the dark. And another one, which I love doing with them in the room, is to pick a blue colour and say, I want you to go around and see if you can find something that's exactly that same blue, because there's blue and there's blue, right? So the child's awareness of the variance of blue and green, and they are so quick to observe and pick up. Like they might say later on in a conversation, oh, the blue on your jumper is, darker than the blue of the sky, or something like that. So it comes up in their awareness. So they're aware more of their physical environment that's around them. They have, it's a bit like us, I guess, with gravity. People didn't know that gravity existed, and yet we know that it's so simple it is. And it's a bit like that with a lot of the Montessori materials. It opens the awareness of the child quite spontaneously and easily, that they are aware, oh my goodness, there's that. The joy on their face of being able to discover more of what's out there. And another example I had was a couple of weeks ago. We were doing parts of the flower with a 4-year-old little boy, and the parts of the flower is a puzzle. So it has the puzzle bits of the petals and the stamen and the pistil and all the other parts. And we went out after we did the puzzle and we looked at all the names. And I said, let's go outside and see if we can find a flower that has all these parts. And so we did, and we came inside. The joy on his face when he started to just gently fold back all the bits so he could see the pistil and the stamen and the petals and the pollen. But, before he hadn't noticed that, because they just run past a flower unless it's brought to their outer consciousness, and then their inner self responds enthusiastically. And they have this love, they develop this love for their environment, both internal and external. And if we want to have children more appreciate the planet that we're on and become better stewards of our planet, well, they are our future stewards, we need to have them be exposed to our environment at an early age, because they are very much able to grasp and understand what it is that is around them.
Yes. And well, that draws us to a valid point that Montessori is all about reality and showing children what's real around them. So whether it is using a real glass instead of a plastic cup, or whether it is doing practical life work that is real. And we know Dr. Montessori talked about children constructing themselves and learning what is real and what is fantasy. And between 0 and 6, children do not have or have not formed the concept yet about what is real and fantasy. So she highly advocates for children to stay away from cartoons, for example, because of the fantasy realm, and children can't decipher what is real and what is fantasy within those cartoons. And so it's interesting, there's a whole topic about Walt Disney and cartoons and that agenda. But, just for this conversation, we know that Montessori is a big advocate about teaching children what is real. So they have a frame of reference to then go off into later learning, knowing exactly who they are, what is what, and having discernment, which is really, really important.
It is. And, a lot of what they see, as I was talking before about the unconscious absorbent mind in the first 3 years and the child transitioning to the conscious absorbent mind, most of our memories start around about the age of 3. And I think that's because we're in that unconscious absorbent mind. But once everything that goes into the consciousness is stored, okay, it gets stored, it's in a way imprinted on the etheric body, what we call the etheric body, or the fire, or the memory body, which is part of who we are. We have our 4 lower bodies, our physical, our emotional, our mental, and our spiritual or etheric body, and they correspond to the 4 elements of the earth: fire, air, water, and earth. So everything that we all experience, particularly as children, indiscriminately goes into our consciousness and it stays there. Whether there is a subliminal message in some of these things, or an ulterior motive, or whatever, if it's something violent, it goes in there. And it does actually impact us on some level in an unconscious or subconscious way. And I don't know about you, but when I first had my first child, my first baby, I just thought, you are the most purest, cleanest, wonderful little being, and I just from a mother's perspective, wanted to protect that innocence and that purity and that just who she was from anything that in my values, was less than that. And I think all parents want that for their children and try and provide that environment, but it's pretty challenging, particularly in today's environment with all the screen that's around and some of the programs that are on the screen. You just think, to me, it's just degrading for the child to have to sit and watch that. There's nothing really stimulating about it. Well, stimulating is probably the word, but there's nothing, I think, that has a lot of value to add to their own building of identity, because that's what they're doing, in the first 6 years, is building that platform, that base of the pyramid of who they are and their identity. And so, do you want your child to have that as in their unconscious or subconscious mind as part of their values? And I think this is where parents, it's very tricky to be a parent these days. Very challenging. That's what I meant by tricky. Being discerning. And a lot of the time it's easy to go with the status quo because you're a bit like a fish swimming upstream. But it's wonderful when you do come across people who have similar values for their children. Clean eating. I remember, my eldest is nearly 40. And to be able to buy the things in the supermarket, I was very much a vegetarian, into raw foods. And the foods that, we take for granted now in the supermarket shelf wasn't there 30, 40 years ago. You couldn't get it. You had to make a lot of it or just go without. So, with clean food, that has really improved. There's a lot of good food. There's a lot of junk, but there's a lot of good food that I see children coming into the environment with the playgroup that I run, and also in our toddler program, that more and more people are looking at healthier food for their children. They want the best for their children. So that's all part of forming their identity. You've got your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual needs. And the Montessori environment has and can provide those needs for children.
Yes. And just drawing out, your words about innocence, and how we as parents like to keep that innocence as long as possible. And the external factors like cartoons or a horror movie does draw that innocence away from children, because we know the word inner sense, their inner sense and their inner contact gets drawn away to something that is external. So, that horror film is on the outer and takes the children away from their inner sense, their inner sense. So we know that, everything has a vibration. And so the lower frequencies of fear really do impact on our children. In fact, it takes me to a memory of a homeopath down in Melbourne in Victoria, who spoke at length about the time that the first Harry Potter films came out, that she was absolutely inundated with parents bringing their children to her because overnight they had changed their behaviour, and it was almost like there was such a disturbance in their personalities that the parents were very, very alarmed. So she had to treat a lot of children for this emotional, psychological imbalance. And we know that when children are open, there is a lower realm, or some people call the astral realm, and there's a higher and lower astral realm, and the lower astral realm is where children can get opened up to and things can get stuck in there. So it's really important that we understand just those fundamentals of discernment as a parent. Do you really want your child to be opened up to some of these energies?
Absolutely. Because it doesn't just stay on the surface. It's energy. Visuals, thoughts, words are all energy. They don't just stay within our own consciousness. It doesn't just stay within the TV or the screen. It goes out. It has a vibration and it's impacting on life. Maybe your children, And I remember that when that Harry Potter first started to come out, the first movie, And one of our very kind parents decided to have a fundraiser, and I had no idea what it was about. I hadn't read the books, had no idea. So we had this fundraiser, and within the first 10 minutes, I just thought, there was some like 4-year-olds sitting there, and I just thought, oh my goodness, this is so dark. I mean, very intriguing, but I would not let my child, maybe under 10, watch it, if 10, maybe 12, because I felt it was very, very dark, and there was no hope. There was no hope in the movie. And for me, the children and the actors, felt like they were there really fighting for their lives on some level. So is that the kind of, and this is my take on it, everyone has a different take, I get that, but I was surprised at the dark vibration of the movie. Having said that, I have watched most of the Harry Potter movies, but not with little children. So anything, I think we do need to be conservative. Watch it first. If something is coming on, have a look and see if it aligns with your values that you want your child to have as their values. We are parents, and we're parents for a reason. We're not just their best friend, but we're also their guardian, and we're there as their disciplinarians. As I say to some parents, it is okay to say no with certain things to children. I think some parents feel that they can't say no to their child. And I said, you can say no, but you can also redirect that child to doing something else. And I give the analogy that if you're on the side of the road with your child, would you say no if he ran out in front of a car? Of course you would. So there are varying degrees of implying that in your child's world. But, you can say, no, you can't have that sugary donut, but you know what? You can have this, what the healthy alternative is. And that's okay. Your child will begin to respect you and understand your values, whether it's with food or with screen, music, all that sort of thing. It all impacts on your children.
It does indeed. And I think this might be a good time for me to just share screen and show people what I hope people can see that. It's the Hertz vibrational scale. So I tapped on a little while ago talking about love being a frequency of 500 Hertz. So here we have higher frequency and lower frequency scale. So for example, if we're watching a horror film or a child is fearful of something that they're seeing, they're going into a lower Hertz vibration with fear being 100, or even anger 150. So we know that the chemical reaction in the physical body of the hormones and the stress hormones like the cortisol and adrenaline is flooding the system, and we know this shuts down the children. So even if it's a short window of that happening, it's still impacting on the brain and the development of the brain and the nerve fibers that are running around the child's brain. And, in particular, when children are stressed and going to the fight flight, they're in their back brain, reptilian brain. And it's not just children, as adults, we go there as well. So as much as possible, we want to encourage our children to stay in higher vibrational states, particularly at a young age. And this is even between, conception and gestation and all throughout the pregnancy, throughout the early years and to the age of 6, when we know that they are fundamental periods of time for drawing out the inner genius, when children are really tapped into their higher potential. So yes, frequency and vibration plays a big role in how we operate our schoolrooms and our Montessori rooms in particular. So I thought I'd just share that. Have you got anything to speak to that, Michaela?
I love the colours. Gee. No, other than it's really interesting to see. And I think we'd all like to operate from a point or be in that point of those upper qualities. Life flows much better when we have that sense of joy, when we have that sense of peace. Anger is such a turbulent energy, and there are a lot of angry people in the world for various reasons, but we want to be able to transcend that and not pass that on to our children. Do we want them to be angry? Do we want them to be fearful? Opposite to fear is probably not opposite, but caution is probably better than fear. A lot of the negative vibrations can actually slow our thinking and our reasoning down, as you've said. They've got the scientific proof to say it, to prove that. But feelings of shame compared to feelings of love and acceptance and willingness. I know what I'd prefer, and I know what my children would prefer as little ones growing up, or what I would prefer for them too.
Yes. And of course, there is unavoidable situations where there is grief and despair and anger, and it's all part of the natural flux of emotions. However, what my point in bringing this chart is to show that there are different levels of emotions and the vibration of those emotions. And ideally, we'd like to create the space or the learning space for our children to be in that upper higher levels of the Hertz scale, and creating peaceful and joyful environments that children can stay and resonate in their heart, where we know that if it's all anchored in by 7, well, that's a great platform for children to then go on and do their further learning. And there's no reason why we can't have high vibrational classrooms with teachers that are aware of the soul's journey and what the language of the soul and what the soul is actually showing us, and the needs that are around that, and that expression.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree. I think there are things we can do as educators and parents to help them, as all children do have needs, as all people do, but to help nurturing with the spirituality of the child. It's to do with the day-to-day raising of children, and we need to address their physiological needs, their safety needs, esteem needs, self-actualization needs, and belonging needs. And some of the physiological needs are regular healthy meals, good sleeping habits, comfortable home environments, appropriate clothing, good health, and safety needs, regular routines, what we spoke about before, consistent patterns, because children are so quick to pick up where there's a chink, particularly if two-parent families where one parent will say yes and the other parent will say no to exactly the same thing. So we need to be consistent with our parenting habits and patterns for the child. We need to provide a safe home environment for them, one that they can explore, but then what they can really live in and be a part of, supportive emotional climate and sensible boundaries for children. And children really do like boundaries, and that's important for them. It helps the soul realize, and the child realize, that it's almost like steps of initiation or rites of passage that they start to engage in throughout their life. So if we have those boundaries set up at home and with our values, we provide the child with that safety net, and also the joy of looking forward to be able to do things that perhaps their elder sibling can do and they can't at this stage, and so forth. So boundaries are really, really important. And I've seen over the years, particularly the last few years, that parents are struggling with boundaries. Some parents are struggling with boundaries, what's acceptable boundaries and what isn't. And that was part of coming to say no to your child. That's why I was sort of talking about that earlier, because some parents find that really hard. But we love them enough to put those boundaries in, because it takes effort. It's much easier to go, yes, sure, go for it. Yes, you can do that. Yes, you can watch this. But by putting the boundaries in and having, you look at your reasons of why you're putting a boundary in. then you're actually caring enough to do something for that child and meet that resistance. You know, not all the time you'll get resistance, but there will be times, but you love them enough to meet that resistance. And they learn to appreciate that as they get older. And I have experience with that with my own children. You know, there are times throughout their growing up that they were defiant of some of the boundaries we had. And, you know, sometimes you have to look at, okay, why is that boundary still there? But if it is still there, they will push some harder than others against that boundary. But as adults, you know, they all have said, thank you so much for putting the effort in and caring enough to deal with our stuff, you know, as children. And now most of them have children themselves, so they get where we were coming from.
Well, they feel safe, don't they, when they've got their boundaries? And I know some people watching this interview may have lots of questions to ask, and it'd be a really great avenue for people to put their questions down in the description box below. But also, we might do a follow-up show, Michaela, and maybe do a live Q&A and invite parents on that they can ask their questions while we're on live, and we can just, you know, see how we go with our answers and guidance that we can give parents, because I know there's a lot of parents out there quite confused as to how to raise their children in certain ways and what type of educational system they want to follow, and just some general guidelines around the developing of the, you know, the child and bringing out their mastery. And it's very easy. You don't need a doctorate to be able to do this for your children. And, you know, we're just following our own motherly instincts and fatherly instincts with how we go about things. So just wrapping up, Michaela, is there any last words like you'd like to share before we finish?
I just think it's so easy to love a child. Forget the day-to-day stuff that sort of clouds that and can sometimes step in between you and your relationship with the child. And a lot of the time we're either tired as parents, or mainly as parents, or even as teachers or educators. We're not in focus ourselves with our inner teacher. We do have one, and it's to the benefit of your soul as a parent or an educator, and to those of the children that you have or you teach, to be in alignment with that. So you need to nurture yourself as well. And life is so busy, although depending where you are with COVID, depend on the busyness. But even that has its, you know, you're in the house all day with your children if you're in Melbourne or Sydney. But anyway, I think my main message is just to love and to trust that if there is stuff that gets in the way of that love or clouds that love, work through it, let it go. It's really not important. What is important is that soul in front of you, that person, whoever it is in your path. So I'd like to thank you, Christine, and for everyone watching, for being here. And may love flow from each one of us to each other.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, Michaela. It's been such a fascinating topic, and I'm excited that we're starting to talk about and bring back the spiritual aspect of Montessori, and having those conversations, because it's a big part of the method. And so if we want to use the method, we need to take the whole method and bring it to the children. So thank you so much, and hopefully we can get a question and answer show happening really soon. So watch this space. Please like and subscribe, and click the like button, and share this film so we can get more people involved. Thank you. Have a great time with your day, and we'll see you next time in the next video. Ciao.